This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Audible. Details are in the link in the description. Welcome to the Catholic with a Bible podcast. My name is Tad, a Catholic who reads his Bible. I have no idea why, but I've always had an affinity for William Shakespeare. And I say for some reason because he's somebody who's not that creative, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of his plot points, things like that. For instance, in two of his plays, it had to be a case of mistaken identity as a plot point. Not very original, but he used that as a plot point twice. If you've ever read his sonnets, the first 15 or so sonnets all go along the lines of, "You're so beautiful, you should have a baby." And I'm not just using hyperbole or anything. Literally, the idea is, "You're so wonderful. How could you deprive a world of more of you?" He does that a lot. His use of language, the way that he uses language is, it's awesome. I really, really, really like the way in which he talks. And of course, the most famous line from Shakespeare comes from Juliet. "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" Which for some reason has confused people, but that wasn't just her wondering, where's he at? Where's my boy? Just kind of reveling in that moment of, where are you, Romeo? I'm longing for you. The use of language is just so cool. And I can't say enough how good his use of language is. But the thing about Romeo and Juliet is it's not necessarily famous because of the language it used. It's more famous because the plot point. And throughout all these podcast episodes, I've done everything I can to avoid spoilers, because who likes spoilers? If I'm going to talk about a book or a movie, I want to give you a reason to still go and watch that thing, read that thing. But when it comes to Romeo and Juliet, we all know the climax, so I don't feel too bad spoiling that. The story of Romeo and Juliet is two teenagers who are told they can't be together, so they kill themselves. Flat out, no embellishments, no flowery language. That is literally what the story is about. I mean, there's old, ancient stories of things like that, but young love, that just hit people, and it made a really big impact. If we're going to be upset about modern music that has inappropriate language in it, let's be honest. This is the story of two teenagers who kill themselves because their parents won't let them do what they want. That's a big deal. That's super, super heavy. And anyone who ever looks into this world of literature and the arts of England way back in the day, that comes up a lot. This story, that plot point. However, the thing for some reason that just doesn't ever get touched on is, why is this the circumstances that we're looking at? As in, what's the deal? Why aren't they allowed to be together? Well, the short answer is the Capulets and the Montagues don't like each other, so of course their kids can't be together. Yeah, why don't they like each other? And it's very peculiar. In the story, they don't say. And I think that's important. The story was written in such a way that no one would really be able to pick sides. It wouldn't be like, oh, if Juliet's side had just sucked it up, or if Romeo's folks just canned it, then things would be better. But that's not what happens here. Instead, we just see the fights. Like one of the first bits of dialogue between the two parties, between two Capulets and two Montagues. A pair of one of the families, which escapes me at the moment, steps out and says, "Do you bite your thumb at me?" Which basically means putting your thumb on your two front teeth and then flicking it forward. Why I just demonstrated that, even though you can't see me, I don't know, but here we are. So In other words, hey, you flipping people off? He's like, yeah. You flipping me off? Turning to his buddy, hey, do you think I could get away with telling him this? He's like, no, I don't think so. I'm like, I'm not saying I flip you off, but yeah, I flip people off. And they start fighting. No rhyme, no reason, just, I don't like you, you don't like me. So that's it. Pummeling each other, swords, fighting. People die because they don't like each other for this unknown reason. Frankly, it's ridiculous, and it feels super, super silly if they're going to just hate each other so much that any sort of resolution never comes up. But this is why I'm bringing this up for today's readings. At no point is blame. At no point do any of these family members have any sort of introspection, a reviewing of their own place within whatever happened in this debacle. It could be a big deal. It could be a little bit of nothing. But we just don't know. And we won't know. And at the end, we just don't know. These two parties, these two families, or I guess they call them houses, the house of Capulets, the house of Montagues. And this problem could have been resolved a long time ago if anyone here, if these two families, if these two houses just took a moment for a little bit of introspection, said, you know what, I have my faults. I can't hate you for something over here if I have that same fault, because all we see is they both have the flaw of hatred. I saw online somebody make a case that there was some economic thing somewhere, some financial dishonesty that took place between the two parties, which if that were the case, then this would be a very, very, very simple thing. Looking at themselves saying, I've wronged you. This thing happened. You did something that wasn't great either, but I need to take care of myself before I start criticizing you. Like Jordan Peterson says, put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And I bring all this up because the reading today is judging others. And I want to clarify something that gets mixed up really, really badly when people read this passage. This is not about not judging people. It's not. That's a part of it. Starting off saying, judge not and you will not be judged. Condemn not and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. It sounds like you shouldn't judge people. That's not what it's saying. If somebody was judged for doing a wrong, then they judged you for the same thing. That wouldn't make any sense unless you were a hypocrite. And that's what these 5 verses are all about. And the crux of it is there will be problems here if you are a hypocrite. Hypocrisy will make things worse. You can solve nothing if you are guilty of that same thing. I mean, if you are guilty of that same thing, you say, this is a problem. They say, well, you do the same thing. You can't say, no, well, you. What about you? It doesn't work like that. And that's the problem that we have here with the families in Romeo and Juliet. It's them saying, it's you guys. You're the problem, not us. And when we look within the Bible, and with this being a part of the Sermon on the Plain, remember, this is not about earth. So this is not a perfect comparison. This is about the ways of God that transcend, and it's what's going to get us to heaven. Jesus showing us the way to do that. It's not for earthly rewards, but in the story here, these people got their very, very devastating rewards. Because no one could look at their own faults and try to course correct. Ultimately, these beloved young members of their families died. At that point, they can't say, this is your fault. No, this is your fault. By the end of it, they realize this is because of something that we both did. And it's devastating that sometimes it takes something that massive to just crumple you, to realize that there's a problem. So when people get to the last scene here, some people see it as a throwaway. It's not. It's the last moment isn't that those two killed themselves. The last moment is when they make this realization, we screwed up. We need to set this aside. And I know that feels kind of heavy. And I know it kind of feels like an inverted thing to share, but really, if they hadn't done just that, things would be wonderful. Their kids They didn't even just run off together. They literally got married. If they wouldn't have done this, if they would have just taken each other as they were and thought, you know what? I'm not going to hate you. You're not going to hate us. They could have been at their kid's wedding. They could have seen their kids raise their kids. That world would be a much better place. And it feels simple, but we needed someone like Jesus to tell us that that is the way that we should live. But in closing, I just wanted to point out, if you don't know Romeo and Juliet, it's a great story. You can go on YouTube, watch a play of it. You can use the Audible free trial that I have in the description and go just listen to the dialogue. Or you can just read it. It's a great story. And just like anything else that Shakespeare does, it's amazing. But that's all I have for you today. I have a special guest coming up on a future episode. But until then, my name is Tad, a Catholic who reads his Bible, and I hope you'll do the same.
Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 42. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. He also told them a parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully taught, will be like his teacher. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, Brother, let me take the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eye.